Well, thank you guys very much for joining. This is our presentation, a presentation from Illumiti about the Alberta Pacific Forest Products process to select a digital transformation partner. So thank you very much for joining us today. A quick introduction of the presenters. My name is Jamie Fryer. I'm the head of sales and marketing for Illumiti, and we are the systems integrator that's leading the Alberta Forest Products digital transformation. And with me, I have John Robinson, who's my peer at Illumiti. John, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Yes, John Robinson. I am head of delivery for Canada. So my role is I have ultimate project delivery responsibility across the country. I've been with Illumiti just under 10 years and implementing SAP since the mid-90s, so going on 25 years.
We don't have any prizes. I didn't realize that was going to be an option, or I would have, because I think that was a really good way to get people engaged. Our agenda for today is to introduce LPAC, the customer, this manufacturing mill products customer in Alberta, and Illumiti and who we are. We'll describe their selection process in detail. We'll discuss the specific pain points that they had that resulted in their need for a digital transformation, and ultimately, how and why they selected SAP and Illumiti to lead that digital transformation. So just quick intro to us. We are Illumiti, are a Platinum SAP system integrator, and we focus primarily on implementing SAP ERP and HR projects. And our differentiator is we do that faster and at a lower cost and lower risk than other system integrators. And that's because we leverage SAP best practices, industry best practices, and our own intellectual property in all of our projects as an accelerator. By the numbers, we're roughly 1,000 SAP customers, 1,700 employees, and we have a pretty significant global presence with 20 offices globally. And our customer, the feature focus of today is Alberta Pacific Forest Products. And a little bit about them: they are a leading manufacturer of quality craft pulp. They have an annual production of about 640,000 tons. And since their opening in 1993, they've grown into one of the largest pulp producers in North America. And they also manage almost 6 million hectares of Alberta's forest. A pretty substantial organization. Now we'll get into, so that's a little bit about who we are. Again, we're the team that's leading this digital transformation. Now we'll talk a little bit about their process. How did they ultimately determine who the right partners will be to lead this digital transformation? John?
All right, thank you, Jamie. So folks, the Alberta Pacific went through basically a 5-step process for their selection process. They started out recognizing that they needed help. This isn't something that they've done frequently. Their existing solution and all the components and various point solutions they had been something that had been in place for 25 years. So not being in the business of selecting ERP packages, they felt they needed help. So they went on a search for selection partners, which we've dealt with many of them, and they ultimately chose a US-based firm. The first item that they helped with, that selection firm helped with, was basically to document their current architecture and processes. And as I said, they had a homegrown system of about 20 odd components not integrated, and they need to kind of get an idea and get their hands around what that looked like. From there, based on some guidance from the selection partner, thoughts they had about where they wanted to be, the technology they wanted to keep, what they wanted to replace, they started to define what they thought the future state would look like of the organization. From there, the next step in the process is they work with that selection firm to come up with an RFP. And essentially the RFP was a definition list of all the requirements that they felt they needed in an ERP system. So we responded, Illumiti, as one of the vendors that was selected to participate. We responded to that RFP. The short list of vendors was based on responses to that RFP. And we were successful in moving on to that next stage. The criteria that they used to do so was based on product fit, not surprisingly. So how we described the features and functions of product technology in the RFP. Price, of course, is always a factor. So that was one of the selection criteria. The technology, so that the platform, the cloud, the options for moving to cloud. Methodology was a big consideration in down selecting in the RFP. So, our approach and other SI's approach to how they implement ERP. And as Jamie said, our differentiator is that we start with accelerators. We start with best practice, pre-configured solutions, Illumiti IP, intellectual property that we've developed. So that was a big consideration, the partner and their approach to implementing. Quality of consulting resources. So, who is Illumiti? Our experience, our consultants, our experience in their specific industry and forestry products, that were broadly known as mill products, and our reputation. So as a result of that selection process, or the down selecting that criteria, we, again, as I said, we were successful in moving on to the next step. So the next step was a series of workshops starting with discovery. Right? So discovery workshops conducted by our solution architects, our most experienced SAP professionals in each of their work streams, took the client through a series of workshops to understand a little more of their requirements and really their pain points, and where were they really experiencing difficulty, and how could SAP make their life easier. Also to make the next step in the process relevant in terms of demonstrating. Discovery helped to inform what would you like to see and in what data. So working with Alberta Pacific to come up with the data that they would like to see in demonstrations. So we participated in a series of demos over a 2-day period. It was a scripted demo, which is often the case, but we worked with the selection company and Alberta Pacific to kind of redefine some of the steps so that we could show, the SAP product in the best light in terms of its integration. So those demos were conducted over 2 days, and based on the results of those demos and the scoring system that they had, that their selection partner had used in the process, they down selected to 2. So we were successful in moving on to the final stage, and us and one other SI. And from that point, the workshops moved towards more about our approach and our methodology, working with them to refine scope, to understand in more detail what our approach was, our methodology. As I said, it was something that was included in the RFP response, but now we had an opportunity to really take them through, the nuts and bolts of how we do projects and our methodology, roles and responsibilities of them as a client, of us, come up with a high-level implementation strategy. In this case, it was a phased approach, big bang, all functionality, but phased in over a couple of years. And also just to get to know us and for us to get to know them. So the cultural fit was part of that process of the implementation workshops. And based on that, the final decision was made, and we were successful. We were selected, SAP and Illumiti, and we moved on to successful negotiation and a statement of work, and the project has been underway since January. So successfully on its way to a go live next summer.
So we're going to move now into the lessons that we learned from the process. But in terms of the objective of this part of the presentation, it's really just to educate a customer who realizes that they want to embark on a digital transformation, but doesn't really know what the process would look like to get there. And we've been through several of these. This particular process was one of the most thorough and sort of well organized and run that we've participated in. So John, some lessons learned.
Okay, so lessons learned. So as I mentioned, the selection process is largely focused on a list of requirements that go into the RFP. That tends to be kind of a features and functions approach to what does our new system need to do. And again, the lessons learned here are in terms of the client's approach to selecting an ERP. Our approach is a little different. We try to focus on what outcomes they're trying to achieve and ensure that the scope defined for the project is aligned to what what business outcomes they're trying to achieve. The outcomes then determine what capabilities are needed in the system. And then those capabilities are then supported by the technical and functional scope. So I think that was a lesson learned by LPAC, and that it was not just about the features and functions and the functionality in the system, but where does it make sense to spend the money? Does it make sense to implement a certain module or a certain piece of functionality if there are no real tangible benefits or really a clear desired outcome? One of the results, or an example of a change in scope that resulted from that, was they had planned to keep their enterprise asset management system in place. It was something they developed in-house. They were comfortable with it. They wanted to interface that at a high level. Unfortunately, that was a little bit opposed to some of the outcomes that they were trying to achieve, and that was reduced procurement or maintenance costs, better preventative maintenance planning, better planning of their annual shutdown. So in this particular industry, in manufacturing of pulp, annual shutdowns are a big deal. It's a big capital cost, and that was something they were looking to get a better handle on. Having an external system interface to SAP, we didn't feel was going to lead to those outcomes or allow them to achieve those outcomes. So we worked with them through the implementation workshop process to really help demonstrate how the functionality within the core system, fixed assets, plant maintenance, enterprise asset management, integrated with financials and the analytics, really helped them to achieve those outcomes, as opposed to just keeping their existing system and interfacing it. So as a result, the scope for the project changed. They decided to retire that system sooner. So again, from their perspective, a lesson learned as far as the process for how they would go about selecting an ERP and defining the scope.
Thanks, John. And then just to expand it a bit more on the business pains that they had that led to this digital transformation and the outcomes that they were specifically looking for. So they were running on a very old legacy system. It was a mix of spaghetti architecture. It was homegrown technologies and some off-the-shelf tools as well, but it was definitely an old system that was outdated and inefficient, need to be replaced. So what they really wanted was to simplify and modernize that landscape in order to allow for integration to new cloud technologies where those would make sense, improve the speed of business, automate business processes, provide the capability to manage those cost-intensive shutdowns that John mentioned before, provide mobile capabilities, and to enable real-time decision-making. So basically all of those pain points, like that is, what most companies want to achieve with a digital transformation. So I don't know if, we can do a Q&A at this point, but is that sort of what those who are on the call are looking for as well, if they're with companies today that are exploring a digital transformation? Yeah, I'm just going to assume the answer is yes. It's pretty consistent, across the board. So that's really the business pains that they had in their desired business outcomes. Why did they ultimately go with SAP and Illumiti? John, do you want to tackle this? Or actually, I'll tackle this one as well. So they chose SAP and Illumiti primarily because of the industry expertise. So that was really critical for them. So both SAP and Illumiti are strong, specifically in mill products. Obviously, SAP and Illumiti also have other focus industries, but for this particular customer, that was very important to them. They wanted local references, companies that they could go see and speak with, and both SAP and Illumiti are very strong in the Alberta market, so that was key for them. We don't use a sales team to deliver our demonstrations. John mentioned that a little bit. It's our implementation team that comes in and does those product demos, which is pretty unique because obviously they can't oversell. They're the ones that actually have to deliver the solutions that they present. And that created a lot of credibility and trust with LPAC. They loved the flexibility of being able to deploy SAP on a hyperscaler so they could scale up and down depending on what their business does. Another big difference was that SAP and Illumiti go to market together as a single team. So throughout this process, it wasn't just Illumiti or SAP, it was both of us in all of the meetings. And they felt that created a lot of accountability between the partners. And then lastly, there was really strong executive involvement from their side. And on the other side, we had SAP senior leadership and the owners of Illumiti involved in the process. And that just gave them confidence that this would be a long-lasting partnership that all firms were very invested in. So that's sort of why they ultimately picked us. And then John's going to talk about where we're going now. So where is this transformation leading, and what are some of those benefits? John, you're muted. It wouldn't be a good call if that happened once.
Somebody had to do that on the call.
Right.
Huh? Just in terms of, summarizing the benefits. So we were able to demonstrate through the system demonstrations, working with them during the workshops, that this really was the right package to achieve a full digital transformation. The embedded analytics that were referred to earlier, having that access to real-time data and acting on that data, something we refer to as insight to action. Real-time data that you can actually drill into and get to transactions and really act on that information right away. Getting away from spreadsheets, getting them off spreadsheets and manual processes, and automating a lot of processes. As I mentioned, their systems were not integrated, so they had a lot of manual steps, and we were able to demonstrate that one of the major benefits is that automation of processes end to end. More connectivity between business units, so integrated processes across the organization as well. A shared set of data, so not a set of vendors in one company and that same or similar vendors in another. So data governance, data consistency and integrity, and visibility to the results across the organization. So being able to see real-time results across all of the various companies that made up the organization. Mobile capabilities. So the Fiori, as it's known, the Fiori user interface, which is something that's used on tablets, phones. So immediately it was obvious with SAP that they would have that mobile capability with the S/4HANA product. Increased capability around demand planning. So integrated system, integrated costing. Better capability to plan demand and MRP and so on. HR functionality. So they had disparate HR systems. So now they have one platform in SAP SuccessFactors for all of the HCM functions they need. And Jamie alluded to growth. So a platform for growth and scalability, a truly scalable system, multi-company, multi-currency. And obviously on the leading edge of technologies like AI and cloud and so on. Improved visibility to margin. So again, real-time data, better visibility to results immediately, relevant results as opposed to reports that are run by the time they're assembled, they're a day or two old and no longer up to date. And that also fed into better spend analysis, more rigor in their procurement process, PO-based procurement, and the integration with accounts payable, and really giving them the ability to better manage their spend. Increased visibility into logistics. So they have, in this industry, a lot of challenges around load planning and their rail cars. So with the transportation management solution in SAP, they felt they could really move their logistics planning forward. And then, as we've talked about a couple of times, capabilities to better manage the plant shutdowns and the capital costs that they incur on an annual basis. So that's a summary really of the major benefits that they felt were the reasons why they chose SAP.
Thanks, John. And just to summarize what we were hoping to communicate in this presentation, it's really what business pains typically lead to a digital transformation. And then once you've made that decision that that's the direction that you're going, what's a good process to run to ultimately select that digital transformation partner? And then once the project is complete, what sort of outcomes or business benefits should you expect? So that was our objective, and hopefully we accomplished that, and it doesn't come across as too much of a sales pitch for Illumiti and SAP. That certainly wasn't our objective. It's really about these are the business pains you're experiencing. This is how to get to that, to that digital transformation partner. And ultimately, these are the benefits or outcomes that you should receive at the end of a successful project. So thank you guys very much for your time. 20 minutes. So I think we'll get routed back. And I think the next section is Q&A. So please feel free to ask us any questions.